Two cops who took a knee in uniform are about to learn the hard way that this isn't the NFL. By Benny Johnson. This week, a wave of national anthem protests gripped the nation. The protests typically involved players on major sports teams sitting out or taking a knee during the national anthem, and they were inspired by President Trump wading into the debate during a campaign rally and saying those who protest should be fired. Individuals of all stripes in America have their own opinion on the controversy. Many have taken to social media to post photos of themselves kneeling in protest. One of those activists, Aletta Clark, entered a Chicago police station and asked the police officers to kneel and put up a fist to protest the brutality of their own profession. Englewood Barbie/Instagram. The officers did so, and Clark posted the image on Instagram with this caption. That moment when you walk into the police station and ask the men of color are they against police brutality and racism and they say yes, then you ask them if they support Colin Kaepernick, and they also say yes, then you ask them to kneel. It quickly went viral. Now, the officers posing in the image are about to learn that them kneeling in uniform is very different from an NFL player kneeling in uniform. As punishment, the officers will be reprimanded and will have to go through new training of police policy explaining that they are not allowed to demonstrate politically in uniform. According to the Associated Press, 2 Chicago police officers are facing reprimands after they were photographed kneeling alongside an activist in what she called a show of support for NFL players protesting police brutality and racism. Chicago police spokesman Anthony Guglielmi says the officers will be reprimanded and reminded that department policy prohibits making political statements while in uniform. The AP goes on to interview Clark, who encouraged the officers to take the photograph. She says they should not be punished and that they were just being humans. I think that they should not be reprimanded, they shouldn't get any form of punishment for being humans and knowing what's right. They kneeled for what was right. They kneeled for what was just, that's them serving and protecting. Clark has since posted other images with police officers kneeling.
During a campaign rally in Alabama last night, President Trump took aim at NFL players who have refused to stand for the national anthem. The movement was started last year by then San Francisco 49ers quarterback Colin Kaepernick, who was protesting police violence. Since then, other players have knelt or carried out other forms of protest during the anthem. The president said team owners should get rid of those players.
Wouldn't you love to see one of these NFL owners, when somebody disrespects our flag, to say, get that off the field right now, out, he's fired.
This morning, the head of the NFL Players Association released a statement saying the union will never back down when it comes to players' constitutional rights. It's a real hot spot around the league.
Yeah, no surprise, even with Colin Kaepernick not playing, that the protests continue and the union continues to back.
Does the government work for us or do we work for the government? Tonight, what if the Constitution no longer applied? What if the whole purpose of the Constitution was to limit the government? What if Congress's enumerated powers in the Constitution no longer limited Congress, but were actually used as a justification to extend Congress's authority over every realm of human life? What if the president, meant to be an equal to Congress, has instead become a democratically elected, term-limited monarch? What if the president assumed that everything he did was legal just because he's the president? What if he could interrupt your regularly scheduled radio and TV programming for a special message from him? What if he could declare war on his own? What if he could read your emails and your texts without a search warrant? What if he could kill you without warning? What if Supreme Court justices no longer looked to the Constitution to determine the constitutionality of a law, but rather simply to what justices who preceded them thought about it? What if the rights and principles guaranteed in the Constitution have been so distorted in the past 200 years as to be unrecognizable by the founders? What if the 50 states were no longer sovereign entities, equals to each other, and parents of the federal government they voluntarily constituted? What if the states were mere provinces of a totally nationalized and fully centralized government? What if the Constitution was amended stealthily, not by constitutional amendments duly ratified by the states, but by the constant and persistent expansion of the federal government's role in our lives? What if the federal government decided if its own powers were proper and constitutional? What if the Constitution were no longer the supreme law of the land? What if you needed a license from the government to speak, to assemble, or to protest against the government? What if the government didn't like what you planned to say, and so it didn't give you the license? What if the right to keep and bear arms only applied to the government? What if posse comitatus, the federal law that prohibits our military from occupying our streets, were no longer in effect? What if the government considered the military an adequate dispenser of domestic law enforcement? What if cops looked and acted like troops and you couldn't distinguish the military from the police? What if you were not secure in your person, in your papers, and in your property? What if federal agents could write their own search warrants in defiance of the Constitution? What if the government could decide when you were and were not entitled to a jury trial? What if the government could take your property whenever it wanted? What if the government could continue prosecuting you until it got the verdict it wanted? What if the government could force you to testify against yourself simply by labeling you a domestic terrorist? What if the government could torture you until you said what the government wanted to hear? What if people running for president actually supported torture? What if the government tortured your children to get to you? What if government judges and government lawyers intimidated juries into convicting the innocent? What if the government could send you to your death and your innocence meant nothing so long as the government's procedures were followed? What if America's prison population, the largest in the world, was a cruel and unusual way for a country to be free? What if half the prison population never harmed anyone but themselves? What if the people had no rights except those the government chose to let them have? What if the states had no rights except to do as the federal government commanded? What if our elected officials didn't really live among us, but instead all had their hearts and homes in Washington, D.C.? What if the government could strip you of your rights because of where your mother was when you were born? What if the income tax was unconstitutional? What if the states were convinced to give up their representation in Congress? What if the government tried to ban you from using a substance in your body that is older than the government itself? What if voting didn't mean anything anymore because both political parties stand for big government? What if the government could write any law, regulate any behavior, and tax any event? The Constitution be damned. What if the government was the reason we don't have a Constitution anymore? What if you could love your country but hate what the government has done to it? What if sometimes to love your country you had to alter or abolish the government? What if Jefferson was right? What if that government is best which governs least? What if I'm right? What if the government is wrong? What if it is dangerous to be right when the government is wrong? What if it is better to perish fighting for freedom than to live as a slave? What if freedom's greatest hour of danger is now?
Hey Charlotte County, this is Charlotte County COPWATCH, and I'd like to thank you for all your years of support through the years. As a result, this channel has grown and allowed me an equity partnership in carmarshal.com. Please take the time to check them out. They help you buy and sell your next car, even have a negotiating tool to save you from the hassle of haggling with multiple dealers. The link is in the description below. Please click and help support and give if you can too through PayPal or Patreon. Thanks again.